Welcome to Atlanta Diaries, a place to have meaningful conversation with breakthrough women to explore the ebb and flow of their unique journeys. I'm your host, Enma Popley. Thank you very much for joining me. My guest today is Dusica Lukac, partner and managing director of DL Capital Partners. Dusica crossed from Money Street to Tech Street after decades in investment banking and millions under M&A deals. Apart from emerging technologies, she has keen interest in financial innovations and provides focused transaction advisory. Her team fondly calls her Transaction Diva. In 2018, Dusica was awarded the Best Fintech Consultant in CEE, and in 2019, she took part in a blockchain panel at the Cannes Film Festival. Apart from having worked and lived in 5 countries, she also speaks 5 languages and loves traveling. And in fact, chanced upon an app which made her realize the current count is 78 countries. Hi, Dusica. Thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast. I'm really excited for this conversation.
I'm really excited that you invited me. Kind of feel like I'm very privileged that I know you, that I can add value by talking to you today.
Oh, you definitely can. And I'm looking forward to sharing your life lessons. You started your career when you were only 15 years old. That itself says a lot.
Yes, just to make it very clear, I was doing summer and winter jobs. I was going to school, I've done everything regular, but I started making my own money, although it was the smaller amount when I was 15. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is that you sort of expose yourself to the big bad world.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. I just had to say that because I really believe that school is very important. And I believe that education also provides you with the knowledge, but on the other side, provides you with a structured way of thinking. And personally, I think I benefited a lot from going to a lot of schools. Today, I do have master's degree, global executive MBA, apart from my 2 degrees I've finished at my college. So I think it's really important. So I just wanted to stress out. I like working. I started early. I think it's important, maybe what I am today. But it's also very important always to work on yourself, on improving your knowledge, but also improving yourself.
Most definitely. Why don't we start with, your background, a little bit historical context, which I know played a huge role in shaping your personality.
I started super early. In my career, like 30 years ago, I started working in diplomacy. I worked for one of the signatories of the Dayton Agreement, which stopped the war in the Balkans. After that, I started very early with banking. I had lots of luck in my career to work with some amazing people. So, for example, the first one was I worked closely with an advisor who shaped up one of the banks that basically was sold later on to Banca Intesa, which is like a huge Italian bank. And the person I worked with was 40 years head of Europe of Barclays in some previous lifetime. I've learned so much from him. I mean, just closely working with him and helping him. And honestly, I started at the bottom. And that was amazing experience. I think that being exposed from the early days to hard work, to lots of different things, to lots of different products, I think that was super important. Later on, my career picked up. I also moved into investment banking. I was buying and selling banks. That was super exciting. And I grew up on a ladder. At one moment, I was running 7 countries. I was the first female country manager in ING. That was like a long time ago. But I also have to admit that constantly was blessed with opportunity to work with some amazing senior people. And I was eager and keen to work a lot. So I was looking for a lot of work. So I think that was important to shape up the good basis, which made me what I'm today. And then I was representing shareholders in last financial crisis when things took turn for the bad with a huge European bank. I've done turnaround of the actual bank of 1,200 people, 5 billion asset. I believe that's kind of a crown jewel in my career because that's something not many people even can read about, not even do that. So we were super successful. I also had a great team members representing shareholders from other countries because we had French, German, and Austrian shareholders. And that was really amazing experience. And after I finished that, I was absolutely aware that things are turning tech because we've done a lot of technology in order to make the banking system sellable. And I decided to start my own business, which I'm still running 7 years after. And that is focused on mergers and acquisitions in emerging technology. But we also did a lot of strategic work, even some business development, particularly for fintech. And of course, the arranging the fundraising and investments. I also tested myself as an angel investor. So I always like to be on top of the things. I have experience also with starting a startup myself, which we successfully managed to fund and all that. But unfortunately, we were too early. So when the pandemic started, we decided to close it. And I continued with my M&A advisory business in emerging technologies, which is actually picking up pretty well. So that's short me. Any specific questions, I just started with this official part, but maybe that's interesting to show that careers are never smooth and going into one direction, that basically life is throwing a lot of different things your way. Like in my situation, there was a lot of things that were not predictable. For example, like the last financial crisis, when suddenly everything that you dreamed of doesn't exist. And I believe that a lot of people today are facing that as well. And you're constantly exposed to lots of challenges. And then it matters to understand that there is no one solution for everything. Just make decision, leap of faith, just go do it, and then adjust and do something else.
This is so impressive, Dusica. Thank you very much for sharing. And also adding that it's never so smooth. There are a lot of unpredictable situations. And why don't we talk a little bit about that? Because everybody sees what's on top of the waterline. What's below the waterline is not something which people see. And therefore, they think it's all perfect and it's all very glorious.
I cannot agree more to that point. Today is even worse than when I was starting because of all the social media. People are showing their glossy lives, like everywhere. We now call it like Instagram lives. Everything's perfect. We just see the end result. So there is an absolute disregard of the process, which I personally enjoy the most because the process is something that definitely can reveal a lot about yourself, because if we would be constantly jumping into the results that we want, we wouldn't learn at all anything about us. And the other thing is also we lost the magic of ordinary. In these glossy lives that we are seeing, everything is so extraordinary. Like people are so focused on representing things as super special, magic. It's unbelievable. While we as a human beings, we actually love structure, our small rituals. We love that simplicity of sitting, like on a balcony in a sunny morning and drinking a cup of coffee and just enjoying the fresh air in your life, and that simplicity of ordinary for me is a magic. I got very philosophical very early. Yeah. But talking about my own experience, yes, of course, I'll never forget the day, I just walk in the office. I started my new job. I was supposed to develop corporate finance function across the region of South Europe. And I just walk into the office one day. And this was like 1 month after I started working. And I just realized that everyone is overstressed because the institution I started working with in the midst of a crisis lost the whole bank. Like we had a hole of 50 billion euros because in a system. So suddenly the question is, what am I going to do? I just started. Am I going to be fired? Am I going to find another job that is even closely similar to this one? Are there any jobs out there? Because everything started crumbling into dust. And I believe that that crisis was incredibly strong because it's very systemic, like system was not functioning properly. So we were seeing like everything crumbling everywhere around us. So I would say that in those moments, I first adjust, read the room, be aware of the circumstances and context. And then, of course, you make the best decision under current circumstances. And if things are not going your way, and I'm going to share something that my father taught me, and I think it's marked my life in the best possible way, you simply stop being, dramatic and jumping left and right. Just realize that things are not going your way, that you can change that. And in the meantime, while you're waiting that things move into right direction, because you have to continue pushing, gain some new skill. Because one day you will get out of, whatever challenge it is, and you will have an extra skill or extra degree or extra language, with you. So that will equip you, for better how to face the next phase. Again, let me quote my great uncle who always told me that the biggest illusion is that life is just going into one direction up. The life is like a pockets of enormous happiness and all in between. And it also matters how we manage these pockets of enormous happiness, but it also matters how we manage all that in between. And whenever we are in between, we should know that the next pocket of enormous happiness will come. So that's what kept me going. And that's why I wanted to mention that, yes, success is coming in waves to all of us. And resilience, persistency, how you use your energy and what you do in downtime as well as uptime matters.
This is very relevant, Dusica, at least at this time when there's now again crisis everywhere and layoffs are happening left, right, and center. So I'm sure your words of wisdom and that of your father and granduncle are going to come to.
Let me just mention my great uncle. He unfortunately he died, but he died 1 month short of 100th birthday, and he survived a Nazi camp. So what he taught me is really special. I just needed to mention that because I think that not many people had such a deep down, and still he built a very beautiful life.
That's amazing. I'd love to talk more about your personal background, the fact that you were surrounded by strong women and the men were all going out to the wars. How did that shape your personality?
My grandmother was amazing. She unfortunately lived through the Second World War, and we were always joking at home, like my grandma came back out of the war with a gun in her hands. There was no discussions with her. It's kind of a joke. Of course, she was very gentle woman and very nice, but also tough as a nail. She was like very thin, and you would never expect that. But she ended up, with the 4 children. Her husband was died and he was killed in a Nazi camp. So she got out of the Second World War. Those were the times when women were not working. And we forget that very often, that just like 50, 60 years ago, it was not an option for women to have decent paid job. And then I recently just heard from my mom that my grandma was very entrepreneurial. She found a job which provided her 2 rooms for the work she was doing. And they got the food. She was working in a bakery. So she would rent 1 room to a couple. She would live in another room. So she would making income, and then she would be working in a bakery to pay off for the both rooms. And that's how she managed to raise her children. I was blown away when my mom told me the stories. To cut the long story short, my mom and my aunts, they all managed to go to the university. They got the degrees. My mom is a professor. She's a very hardworking woman. And my sister, she has post-PhD in medical science. She's the smart one in the family. So she's today 60. Whenever I was a kid and I wanted to complain a lot, my complaints were not entertained. So that was the whole point. They were really hardworking people, also very warm-hearted people. So I felt lots of love, but also I was never allowed to make excuses if there was not a real situation for that. Of course, if there was a real situation, of course, it was different. But I think that helped me a lot. And having this kind of very strong female role models directly in my vicinity, I think that was super important for me to understand that I can. It was only the matter of time and effort invested to come from point A to point B. So I think that it's sometimes really good to be tough with yourself, to be honest and see if situation is really that difficult so that you need to excuse yourself from doing more, or is it maybe something you can work on and with more capacity within yourself over the time overcome as something that is blocking you. I think it's the biggest asset from my childhood. I don't complain much. I assess situation, I analyze, I put my pluses and minuses, I choose my battles wisely. We thought a lot about it. And when I choose a battle, I know I have weapons for that battle. I know I have strategy for that battle. I know I have resilience and persistency. And then I engage. There were situations I didn't, that I made assessment that it's not the battle I want to do, or I don't have enough of weaponry, or I need to gain more schools, or I need to gain more knowledge. So that happened. And then I would regroup, do that, and start again.
I love that. Share with us a battle and how did you navigate it? What weapons did you choose?
Without really going into details and boring people with them, I would mention that, for example, at some point I felt it was very difficult for me to grow within the corporate environment where I was, because I had bosses. They wanted me to work on one region while I really saw myself working on another region. And I was sometimes, it happened to me twice in my career. And I believe that also comes with the baggage that I'm female. So for me, it's easier to be put on lower performing region, just someone has to cover it and you should be happy to have that. And we're talking about the time 20 years ago. We're not talking about time today. So I would usually be the only female person in a room. And I knew if I start screaming or complaining, that would not be positive, because that would not bring me to the goal where I want to be. If I don't say anything, that also is not an option, because then I will be pushed aside. So I would formalize what I want, that I can do what they want me, but I would put a deadline. If they don't resolve that situation until a certain deadline, I would definitely be forced to look for another job. But the whole point was that if you're going into that way, you have to be sure that you're ready to do that. But for me, being in banking, I knew that results matter most, and the most recent results matter most. So if I constantly working in underperforming geographical region, I would never be able to deliver results that would bring me up. So that was, for example, one situation where I had to assess the way how I'm going to address that it is not only I want to do that, because that is wrong, that I basically am able to put on the table what is the benefit of me doing something else, to exercise clearly that my capacities and talents and knowledge is underutilized and that institution is losing money because of that. It was very important to get out of the mindset, I want to do that. But basically to sit in the mindset, yes, I'm keen to do that. This is my goal, but this is what you would get if I was doing that. And on the other side, if I constantly go into that direction, you don't give me the right opportunity, I will have to seek for that opportunity somewhere else, which I do not want to do because I like working with you guys. So instead of being high maintenance drama queen, I had to be very grown up person who would basically address the situation in a way that it can reach the other side. And I think that was also a very helpful situation for me. I personally believe it was very helpful to go through that at early in my career. And I have to thank a friend of mine who gave me that advice, because when it happened first time, I remember, of course, after the work, I met with her and I was vivid. I was all over the place, like, oh my God, they want me to do that. They want me to move there. I don't want to do that. And I was like going like that. And then she said, like, yeah, but what's in there for them? So I can hear only you don't want something, but you work for institution. Let's move away from what you want. This is kind of children very focused on, I want that. Let's see how you can contribute to what they want. And then they will understand that they can utilize. That was very valuable advice, because I think that also carried me later on in all of my career progressions, because I was always very rational in a sense that I knew my worth. I knew how much I'm worth to the institution, but I also knew that I have to contribute to what they need to achieve, and was able to identify where I can contribute the most. And then if it happened once in my career that our goals and visions did not synchronize, and I moved on. I actually moved on.
I think what you've shared is probably something which a lot of women or men go through, but often because of circumstances or challenges or personal commitments, you're scared to take those decisions. You're talking about a lot of self-awareness. Was it intentional, or was it something which it was ingrained in you because of the background?
Well, I do have an analytical mind. That is true. And I use that a lot to analyze myself and what I'm doing and what I'm not doing. I also didn't shy away from looking for the external support in order to understand better myself, to learn more about myself. I experimented a lot, in a sense, also going through therapy, and I myself, I am a licensed psychodrama therapist as well, because I've decided to go that way because I wanted to improve my presence in negotiation rooms. My daily work is constantly marked with lots of negotiations. And one of the important things when you come to the negotiations is that you do not bring your own luggage to the room, because you won't be able to see the reality. For example, if you live as a kid that didn't have enough love, let's say, and you feel need for that love, you would feel need as a grown-up to be approved and validated by others. So if you enter the negotiation room without awareness about that trait of yours, you will be just sitting there and doing things in order to gain validation and acknowledgement from the people in the room. And that would make your negotiations going into the different directions than maybe you would want to drive it. So what you can do, you can be aware, you can reflect on yourself with the help. Sometimes you need help of professionals. And then when you come into the room, when you feel the urge to react in a certain way, you will be able to assess if you are reacting from your personal inner child or whatever trait you have, or you are actually reacting because of the actual situation at the table. I think that separating these two things is most important thing. You still can feel whatever you need to feel, because we're never perfect. There is no perfect person that resolved everything, no package or whatever. But the whole self-awareness thing is about separating your personal reaction and actual situation. Once you do that, you can say, I understand why I feel like that. this is a situation where I shouldn't be reacting personally to because I didn't cause this situation. I'm not the source of a problem or whatever is happening. So let's see how we can find a solution. And I do understand how I feel. I'm not saying that you shouldn't feel or that you do not validate how you feel. That's absolutely important. But I think it's a crucial thing. And this is why I decided to dig deep into my own psychology, into my own head, because I wanted to be able, when I'm in the room, to see if I'm reacting to something. Am I reacting because of my own personal, some angle, or there is actual real situation where I should be reacting that strongly? In 99% of cases, extremely strong reactions were coming from a personal reaction to a certain situation, not from a real situation. I think it's very close to your philosophy, Emma.
This is very interesting, and in fact, the other day I was having a chat with somebody, and, in such a simple way, she summarized what you're saying, that, if there are any interactions, any conversations at work, don't take them personally. And that's something which really struck me. Often we tend to get defensive or we tend to react because we think it's an attack on us, when it's actually an attack on the role. You have nothing to do with it. You just happen to be there performing that role.
Exactly. I think it's really important to say that we do have right to our own reactions to certain situations, but we should definitely be able to recognize where it is coming from. And that for me is an extremely valuable tool. And I mean, I've decided to dig deeper into psychodrama because that's an amazing tool for people who are very analytical, because you don't talk much. And the whole psychodrama was invented by Joseph Moreno, who lived in Vienna by accident, and I'm Viennese. And he moved in 1925. I think he moved to New York because he invented the tape recorder. But the whole point is that he's famous for that because he came to Freud when Freud was still alive and very big, and he said, I'll continue where you stopped. I think it was really bold of him to do that. But the point is that he came up with a system looking at children playing outdoors, and he realized that if we would be playing certain situations without talking a lot about it and analyzing and thinking, we might express ourselves more, and we might actually get in touch with our emotional reaction and our emotions. And this is how theater of emotion came into life. Going down that path as someone who is mathematical and numerical and all that, I think that was the best thing I've ever done. I think it was super important to understand that no matter how we all love tables, Excel sheets, and charts, and pies, and graphs, and all that, business is done by people, for people. So there are always people in the room. Even if they're not in the room, the spirit is in the room. So I think that's very important to understand psychology of people, your own, and of the people around you, in order to be happy and healthy and successful.
I just had a conversation yesterday with a very senior finance person in Dell. And on the same note, I had a chat, and she's coming on the podcast. Both of them are coming on the podcast with this lady who's a flight director at NASA. Okay. And all three of you are people who are otherwise playing very analytical roles, talked about success because of, relationships, people related, understanding people and so on. So clearly there's more to leadership than just being mathematically strong or analytical or, having a strong skill set.
I have to share something with you. I recently read a research. There was a scientist within measurably high IQ who is also mathematical, analytical, and all that. And he unfortunately had an accident. He was hit in the head. And during that accident, the part of his brain where emotions are processed was injured. However, he was lucky that there were no other consequences. So in his situation, they discovered that he was unable to make even the smallest decision. So he would wake up in the morning and he was unable to decide which shirt he should wear, because he would analyze and analyze and analyze and come to the conclusion that he needs shirt. Is it going to be black or white or shirt, short sleeves, long sleeves, whatever. And then they basically analyzing his behavior because he realized he has an issue. We finally understand that IQ is literally supporting function of emotions, because we make choices in our lives based on our emotional reaction. And that is the key for fast decision making. If you can combine analytical risk management skills, which are going very fast, with a high awareness of where the emotional reaction is coming from, you actually combine the best of the both worlds. It's amazing research. That changed the way how I think about emotions. Like, I think that a lot of people glorify emotions. Also, I meet a lot of people who are, I don't know, talking about emotions as a magic thing and absolutely disregarding intellectual or analytical side. I think the reason for that, I'll be very honest, is because they do not have structured approach to learning. So they're picking up left and right pieces of information and losing lots of time, unable to process whole information together. So then it's better to delegate everything to this undefined emotional segment. But I think that emotions are not that undefined. I think that every human being has the same set of emotions. What is different is how these emotions are triggered, what is the intensity of these emotions, what is combinations in between them, and do we recognize what is hidden in that particular reaction?
To me, Dushya, what is standing out is actually really acknowledging that emotions can play a very strong role in determining success. Yeah. And that is something which not everybody recognizes. Often you tend to typecast people or stereotype people for being emotional, and sort of it almost makes them defensive. And I'm actually wondering that probably that's the element which women are bringing to the table.
You can be emotional and not to be hysterical, not to be aggressive, not to be in a drama. I think that emotional reactions or our external explosion of our emotion does not correlate with the depth of our emotions.
Absolutely. Let's shift gears a little bit and take a step back and understand from you, how did you become an investment banker?
By accident. Like the best things in your life, they happen by accident. I have to say that, of course, I started, as I say, on a totally different side. And I started with structured finance and general lending and like all these big products. We all start where there is an enormous number of people needed. But it came my way. I jumped on it and I loved it since then because of complexity. And to be honest, going back to this, I love people. And in investment banking, it's all about negotiations. Of course, you need to have set of skills, knowledge, mathematical angle. You need to analyze and calculate what is A, B, C, or D option. But what will happen is what happens in negotiation room. I love negotiations. And if you do not have like prerequisite understanding, like financial modeling, all this balance sheets, how numbers work, what goes where. I mean, you need to know that, because how will you negotiate? I mean, you have to know what does it mean preferred stock, what is ordinary stock, and how that reflects in future, what is the waterfall of the payments and things like that. You have a lot of technical knowledge, and that you conquer in the first 5 to 7 years of your career, because it takes time. You will go to the proper trainings, you will meet people who know more, you will learn, and that works perfectly. But then there is this huge jump from someone who is analyst to becoming actual investment banker or deal maker, that then you move to the zone of negotiations, network, how you put people together, where is their mutual zone of interest. Can you bring like 4 different people with the different agendas together and help them identify that one segment that will work for everyone? And I think it's in the end what attracted me most in this job, and I stick to it. I love it.
And from there, then started your entrepreneurial journey. What drove you to really getting into entrepreneurship? And with the wisdom of hindsight, what are your learnings?
That was really, I've done everything wrong. Let me put it this way. I felt that my calling, I need to go into that direction. And I don't think I'm wrong. It is just that I've really taken my head through the wall. And I think that things should be done easier. I think that people should actually plan before they start their own business. They should explore and identify what they really want to do. And then while they still have the other job, because I made a cut, I had some savings and started my job. Like I was very confident I can deliver. I did deliver, but I had ups and downs. I invested as angel investor, lost money. I've done a lot of things, which was a great learning opportunity. But I came in some moments when I was really like, seriously, is this what is happening? But I think it's quite important. Maybe today we know a lot about individual journeys. When I started, a couple of people shared with me a few points, and I thought I'm going to manage it differently. I did manage it differently, but they had a very valid points. And I remember these points. For example, this is why I'm suggesting that if you're already having a job and you're considering to become an entrepreneur, it really makes sense, to come closer to the people who are doing what you plan to do, to listen what are their experiences, to understand what are the hurdles on the path you're choosing, how you can structure your own infrastructure that will help you to go through these hurdles. And then also starting already making initial contacts. And then, of course, when you already making some money from your own business, then seamlessly move into entrepreneurial role. I would say that it takes 1 to 2 years to get to that point. I'm not joking, because I had to go out there, test the waters, succeed or fail, adjust quickly. I'm very hands-on, hardworking, so I can jump from one role into another one. But it never is the same as it looks like when you looking at it from original position. So once you're in the eye of the storm, it really looks different than from the outside. So I would advise everyone to test the waters before they jump into them. Many times in my life, I jumped into the cold water, as a German saying says, let's jump into the cold water. And I was just swimming, because that's not an option not to swim if you're in a cold water. But that's not comfortable. That's really not comfortable. If I was starting today, I would invest more in exploring how to move into entrepreneurial world. I think that many people today also start entrepreneurial journey because they are unable to continue the corporate journey. And that is also important to recognize and to make peace with that. Because if you don't, you will be constantly going to and fro. And then you would try to go back, you would feel rejection, then you would go back to entrepreneurial path and you feel bad because of all this rejection. And I think it's quite important to clean up that so that you can enjoy your path.
What you've again shared are hard facts. Rejection is one of the biggest challenges of entrepreneurial journeys. So any anecdotes, any examples on when you face rejection and how then did you cope with it?
I'll tell you something even worse than rejection. I did 300 hours work for a client in Silicon Valley in recommendation references coming from the highest places in my network. And that client never paid me. And the reason why I've done a really enormous amount of work, because I trusted the client, because there were a lot of very senior people involved that I trust. It ruined my important relationship that put us together as well. And the whole thing was very unfortunate. I was coming from corporate world where there was an army of people clarifying small details, fine print on a contract. I was only one person doing negotiating and putting things on the table, very keen to do the deal. I remember I tried to negotiate partial payments, and then I realized I'm not the only one. I think that there were some lawyers involved. It was a kind of a bigger thing. It was not just, they would anyway do that. I couldn't do anything better. That was the point. But at that moment, I didn't realize until I realized that the others, and that it's a kind of a bigger issue. But I remember I was talking to a friend of mine. She's a lawyer from New York, and she was advising, why don't you do that? Why don't you do that? And she's very confrontational. She likes to jump on the things. And I'm actually more like, I need to have solution fast because I don't want to spend too much of my resources on something. And that mode took over in that situation. I remember I was sitting there and said, okay, you can really now go down the drain crying for all that money, which I really needed at that moment, really, really needed, because it was enormous amount of work, which I basically lost other clients for that. So you can continue crying like a little baby. That's an option. Cry as much as you want. Or you can put your big girl hands up, look into the situation, and see that if you go down the drain and decide to sue them and to go, you will lose extra money, a lot of time, lots of resources, because my energy that I spend on my work is a resource. So what can I do? I decided to close that book and to look into the whole process with another eye and to restructure the way how I negotiate with the client, how I build the client, how I do a lot of administrative stuff, which I never did before because we had systems for everything. And basically, I built up the next phase of my business on this experience, learning from every single thing that I felt could be improved, and design the different systems after that. But most important thing, when I decided to put, closure on it, I never turned my back. Because every single second that I spent thinking about that and being nervous or belittling myself, not sleeping well, oh my God, what could I have done with that money, is resource for something else. And I think that's in my life one of the changing moments as entrepreneur, because I said a lot of times no, because it resembled to that situation. It looked like I could make a lot, and it was very difficult to put it in a structure that I made. I said no multiple times, and I think I did well, because later on I saw I was right, because it simply was not the client that fits my structure, my way of living, what I'm doing at the moment, and where I'm going.
That's talking about a lot of mental strength, Dusica, and I think that's a secret of entrepreneurship, right? You cannot keep on thinking about what went wrong.
You have to make a clean cut at some point. And I think that one hit me pretty bad, because I somehow came out, of the big world. I've done a couple of deals, things are really good. And then I hit the wall with the best possible referral point with top guys, Silicon Valley, all that I always dreamed of. And I think that was very important for me to happen. And I feel that I meet a lot of people that are unable to move on from mistakes because they feel constantly guilty. I really have done everything possible under circumstances. And I think that also analytical segment, recognizing that you have done everything possible. And if there is something to be improved, don't cry over the spilled milk, improve it from now on. And if you don't look into that, if you're constantly crying about it, you would never learn. Then again, you're losing.
I have a flip question for you. Had you experienced a very difficult situation as a professional when you were running the banks? Would you have dealt with this situation any differently?
I would. Look, I dare you not to pay to the bank.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's a different situation. For me, that was also to recognize the difference. One thing is you have army of people, full pockets of money, hired lawyers, and I would simply as a bank be obliged towards my shareholders to bring him to the court, even if I don't get any money, even if he's in bankruptcy procedure. I have to do that to show them that I've done my work representing their money. As one individual, like having my own business, I have to pay my vendors, but I have to decide what I'm going to do with my resources. And that's absolutely different situation. In both situations, let's say I know that I will not get any money because he filed for bankruptcy. So whatever money, if there was there, it's somewhere else, and I cannot even get it. So I can only register my claim as a part of in a court. But as a bank, I'm obliged to do that because of my shareholders, because maybe in 10 years' time, something will pop up, maybe not. As individual, as investor and managing partner, I have to decide, am I going to invest that amount of money to do that? Or I'm going to invest that amount of money in, I don't know, online marketing and boost my business? I just want to say something very important. In both cases, I didn't feel smaller. It's really important it is only about assessment of my resources, which I have at hand at the moment. It's not about me being more or less. So that I just wanted to mention. It's really important to understand that, because people sometimes, because they don't have all the resources at hand at that moment, might feel that they're smaller, belittle themselves, and that would be negative for them. You're just assessing the current situation honestly and moving on based on analytical response you get.
It was a very practical approach, right? It was a very realistic and practical approach. I mean, end of the day, as an entrepreneur, you have a certain kind of resources. And when you have a support of a large organization, your abilities are very different.
Yeah, that's for sure. And as said, even if you're small in operations, it doesn't mean that you are like less than what you have been in the previous experience.
No, absolutely. Dusica, let's talk a little bit about your journey as a woman leader.
I'm a little bit of outlier there. First of all, I'm absolutely aware of the legacy that we live. I became kind of manager in 90s of the last century, so it's like a long time ago. And I remember many amazing women that were unable to hold any position just 50 years ago, thanks to my grandma and my mom and their friends, etc. So I have to admit that, first of all, I believe the situation we are in is historically driven. This is like this legacy issue, and it is changing rapidly. Whenever I meet people, and I do meet misogynist people all the time, we all do, I'm 100% aware that it's not coming from me doing anything. It's their luggage, their burden they're bringing to the table. That is extremely important. And I'm also aware that if I meet someone like that is very burdened, whatever I say or do, I cannot change that. So that's another assessment situation. If I read the room and I feel that someone is open to moving the boundaries, I move them. But if I see that someone is not, I don't touch them. I'll just let them stew in whatever the stew they're sitting in. I did meet a lot of people, and I've seen some of them change because of my attitude. Because even if I don't want to argue with them, that I don't have half a brain because I was born as a female. I know it's difficult to understand, but I don't. I have the same brain as you have. I feel that many of them changed because I will steadily continue doing what I'm doing. So I had person who was very conservative. It was just 1 year before retirement. I was imposed by shareholders on him to communicate. He didn't even want to talk to me. I would sit and write an email. I was very how to say, remote from any conflict or drama, but I was very structured in the way how I was addressing things. I was simply doing my job. And after a year, he started talking to me. And I was not even celebrating that as a victory because I was just thinking whatever is happening in his head, it's in his head. Even if he's jealous or he doesn't want the world to change or whatever, someone, I don't know, his mother did whatever he did to him, it's not my thing to even think about it. So I was focusing on myself, on delivering results and trying not to fail because of poor communication. Once he retired, basically, he expressed lots of respect for this kind of approach because I think that he enjoyed conflict. And by being like that, he wanted me to jump into conflict. I never did. And I think that that was very important. I had a different situation, but I also had situations of very elderly gentlemen who supported me a lot. I really think it's on case-to-case basis. Sometimes people don't like us because they just don't like us, and sometimes they do. And even if they don't, and if they do, we have to be to have a cold head on our shoulders to see what is our job and what are we doing and what we can achieve. Because, it's not my job to change the world by arguing with the world. I feel that I'm changing the world by simply doing what I'm doing. And sometimes people see that, sometimes they don't see that. But I see that.
That's such a beautiful perspective. Dushita, did this come with experiences? Was there any turning point when you sort of made yourself so mentally strong to, be able to address or deal with situations like this?
We are a mixture of a lot of different things. But I would say that the big game changer for me, for someone with this type of analytical mind, was understanding my inner world and my own boundaries. I think that was a crucial changing point because that basically gave me a different perspective. Of course, I always had this tendency, and I had a very good upbringing, I had a lot of educational support, and I had the luck to meet some amazing people. My father was also very charismatic personality because we always talk about female, but I think that he's one of men of the older generation. Unfortunately, he's not anymore with us, but he never exercised any misogynist traits. He never thought of me less because I'm a daughter. No, on the contrary. I think that that is also important. I think that influenced me a lot as well. But I think it's the changing point, the tipping point was that I learned my inner world well.
You shared last time that you're single, right? What kind of empathy did you bring to women colleagues?
Yeah, well, let me put it this way. It's my choice, I've decided to live a different life than socially accepted. Let's put it that way. I've decided not to have children myself. I've thought about it and it's my decision, which comes as a surprise because my sister has a clinic for infertility. She built up a business out of making babies. But I also love children, and I recognize when people really build up families, it's important part. Going back to that, I remember my first job as a manager, team leader, and I had my senior manager. She was amazing. She still is. And she's really amazing. And I really needed her because it was a small, tightly knit team. And we were on a winning streak and we needed, to deliver. And she already had one kid and she was working amazingly. And she came one day to me and said, "Oh, I'm pregnant." I literally went back home and I was talking to my sister. I don't know, how could she do that to me? And my sister was like, "Do you hear yourself? Can you hear how big idiot you are? Can you, do you understand what you've just said? And that moment, I literally saw myself so selfish. So I mean, it was a long time ago to my, like I have to say something for myself, but that was the first time I experienced that suddenly someone I rely on daily is not going to be there. And I was so ashamed of myself for being so selfish, and thinking only in terms of my end year results, and because she's an amazing person and we need more humans like that, on this planet. And that moment was for me, and thankfully my sister was there to slap me like seriously, do you hear yourself? And I think that she cured me for my whole life, because I honestly, from that moment on, I changed a lot, because tomorrow I came back to the office. My friend, she doesn't know about that at all, because she doesn't know about my intense reaction. Because tomorrow I invited her to the office and said, look, we have some plans made. I don't know how you feel. Do you feel that you can work or you cannot? And she said, like, I'm super healthy. I can work until the end. And I said, look, just tell me, I know that you will just deliver the baby before the winter. The winters are rather harsh in that part of the world. It was continental Europe. And I was like, I know that it will be difficult for you to travel to work with a small baby and all that. Let us agree how we shall manage it. Could you tell me how much time you need? I will take someone, I will cover part for it, I will keep your job for you. And if just let us agree to that. And she did work almost until the last week. She was absolutely amazing. She agreed with her husband, so they split. He also took paternity leave. She was breastfeeding a baby, so we agreed that he can bring the baby to the office and she would sit in a conference room and breastfeed, because we work a long hours. So even if she would prepare, and she came back after 7 months. That's what we have agreed. And then she told me, like, you're the first person ever who supported me like that. Because you see, when I did deliver my first baby in a previous bank, when I returned to the office, and this is like really old days. I know that today people don't even remember that, but there was a department for that were putting these letters into envelopes that you're receiving. Today is done by machine, but then they had people doing it. They literally put her in this mailing department, because suddenly she became liability instead of an asset. And she told me, like, I never thought that it is possible to have this kind of human approach like you did. And I have to say, it's of course thanks to my sister, but I also knew that she's very mature and very professional. So whatever we agree, she's going to stick to that agreement. And she did. I mean, we worked together closely for years, and I really knew how strong she is. And yeah, I think it was when she told me that, I couldn't believe what they did to her in a previous job. I'll be very honest.
That's a story which is relevant even today, Dusica. Women often struggle on what next once they've sort of decided to plan a family. So maybe the situation changes or the nuances change, but I don't think what you're sharing is not relevant even in today's scenario.
I'll tell you something else. It's not only about the baby. I mean, I remember, because I react to cold weather. I'm a warm weather person. So whenever it's a cold weather, I can get easily cold, like it's not complicated. But before the work from home, it was an issue, staying 2 or 3 days at home. And I remember, like, when I got my first managerial position and it was really going well, then the winter came and I was twice at home for 2 days. And then I was invited for a talk in HR, and my HR professional told me, you have to find a way to strengthen your immune system if you want to be a manager, because you cannot be that weak and staying at home during the winter 5 or 6 days. It just will not work. Then you are not managerial material.
Wow. So what did you do?
I strengthened my immune system. I was like, what should I do? How can I, it was a huge shock to me, because I felt always, I started dressing up more, like when it's winter, because while I was getting cold, I like to dress up nicely in a nice shoes, like a girls do, and I would go out, it's cold, I'm freezing, but I'm fine. And then I would come home and I have a cold. But I'll be very honest, I did invest a lot in my health. And I did have a health situation as well, but I had to leave a job, and this was in between jobs because it's very difficult to have a high level position and to handle health issues as well.
Mm-hmm. As a leader and somebody who's worked across geographies, across cultures, and you also mentioned that you have traveled to 78 countries. Is that the right number?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Very proud of that.
So beautiful. So I want to talk about those travels. And I also want to understand, how did you navigate all these different geographies and cultures during your work?
I worked with most of the cultures on a planet in different environments. I believe that I worked with some very conservative, some very open. There are some cultures that fit well my mentality, like, for example, Dutch. I enjoyed working with Dutch people. I so fit well with the way how they see the world and all that.
Egalitarian, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I like working a lot with British people, and but there's also some very conservative cultures, and I worked with them as well. Very close with foreigners, not even speaking English, and then you have to learn their language, and it's a must. You certainly have to see that. My brain see that as a video game, So if there is there are some rules, and you have to find a way to navigate these rules if you want to win this level, if you want to go to the next level. Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes it's really difficult. Depends, if it's multinational environment, it's easier because you would have one or two people with very specific skills and requirements. And then if it is like only one culture and you have to fit in and it's not your type of culture, it's very difficult. In situation number one, I am aware and I try to be respectful because people have their own habits and customs, traditions, and I'm really trying to respect that. They may not be same like mine, but I still feel that it's important that I recognize them, that I do not walk over them like an elephant in the glass shop. That means learning about your coworkers, understanding where they're coming from, what's important to them, and and I always had amazing coworkers who, once they recognized that I'm appreciative, that was very important. But if you work in an environment which is one culture, which is really contrary to your own values, you have two choices. The first choice is move on. It's not your environment. It's absolutely fine to recognize the context. It would be maybe too much of an effort, and you wouldn't receive enough of the reward for the effort invested. So that's one option. The other option is, if you cannot move on, which can also happen, to recognize and to make a plan how to move on from there and what you can gain being there, because you should always gain something. It happened to me. I had both situations. The second one was very difficult to navigate. It required a lot of self-awareness and confidence because these things get to you no matter how smart you are. But in the end, I had a goal ahead of me, I knew I have to move on when the situation is better, when I achieve A, B, C, D things, and then I can move on. And I did. But it's really important to recognize situation. There is this English saying, don't make a wallet of pig's ears.
And what about the 78 countries? Talk to us on how do you strike that balance? Because I'm sure there are a lot of comments saying Dusica is a workaholic and all she can think about is work. It sounds like that to me.
First of all, yes, work is very important to me. I work a lot, but still I play a lot. So that's clear. I've always loved to travel a lot. That was very important to me. I love people. I love different culture. I love history. I'm a big history fan. I spend every morning, I wake up earlier and read history books because I really love history. You can't even imagine how much. I learn a lot about people by understanding the history of their country. So whenever I'm traveling somewhere, I also like to understand where I'm traveling. to get a little bit better understanding, and that it's not like empty travel. So I go from one, like Disney park to another Disney park. I really like to get a little bit of perspective. I cannot fully immerse myself for a couple of days into certain culture. You really have to live there, but at least I can see it, not judge it. Not for me, that's important. I had some amazing stories from these travels. I mean, I wish that we had more time.
I know.
Yeah, it's really, but it's impossible. Why 78 countries? I was not counting. Just one day I got this app a friend of mine sent me. And when I put all the countries where I've been, it came with a number.
Wow.
I was not even aware, I also have a lot of friends around the globe. I try to stay in touch with them. So whenever I travel, I try to combine to see my friends, to go out and all that. I read a lot, as not only history books, but Kindle is always with me. I don't drive. I use public transport, and I always read on it. I used to drive, etc., but not anymore. Thankfully, I live now in the cities, like where I don't have to. But if I was in the US, I would have to drive a long distance.
That's so true.
And I paint. Watercolor is my instrument. I have some amazing friends. Some of them are more successful than me. I think that's also quite important. I'm always talking about a good friend of mine. She's running a huge company. She's general manager for Europe, but she wakes every morning at 5:00 to bring her daughter to swimming practice. Can you imagine that commitment? And then while she's waiting, she's running and she's telling me, I barely can open my eyes, but she's doing it. And then the weekend comes and she takes her for competitions and supporting her. And she has 2 daughters. They're both successful, very, very successful. So when I see people like that, I feel like I'm taking it easy.
Am I doing enough, right?
Doing enough. True.
This is so inspiring. Since you said that there are so many stories you would have spoken about. Yeah, I'd love to know at least 1 or 2 of them.
Many years ago, I was in Southeast Asia. So I was in Thailand, in Bangkok, and I had what I call a perfect day. It was an amazing day. Everything was just smoothly going from one point to another. I still remember it as the best day in my life. In the middle of the day, I was just going to see this lying Buddha and, a little bit on my own. And I came across 3 elderly monks that were predicting the future. So, of course, what I'm going to do, I'm going to sit with them. And the youngest one, he was 76 and he was translating. So just giving you this clash of the world, it was amazing. So he was telling me, a couple of things, and you may or may not believe in it. I was enjoying the moment. For me, this seeing them interacting, 3 of them. One is reading the number, the other one is drawing something. The third one is trying to translate into English, which is very broken English. It was an amazing experience. And then I really wanted to give them some money, and because I thought it's showing the respect, and I didn't have any other currency except US dollars, and I took a couple of banknotes and I'm trying to give them, and the eldest he took this $20. What is this? He didn't even know what that is. He was like, I'm not sure I should receive this. And I was laughing at the moment. Can you imagine? That's the moment when you realize that no matter how globalized everything is, that there are pockets of this planet where people still live differently. And I think that these pockets are worth exploring. If I manage to pass on the atmosphere a little bit of that day, yeah.
I'm sure there'll be some point when you'll sit down and document all these journeys, and we'll bring you back again to talk about them.
Well, I did maintain a travel blog as well, and I have 5,000-6,000 people following it because I write about these places where I visit less known facts. For me, that was always funny thing. Let me find something that is less known, Some of the places were very successful. I even made a lot of photos. My photos for example, from Nepal, they were also published. So I got even an award for one of these photos and things like that. So yeah, that's the fun thing.
This conversation has been so wonderful and insightful, but obviously all good things have to come to an end. But before I end, our conversation today, Dusica. Since you know that Atlanta Diaries is a place where we can learn and unlearn our definitions of success, any parting thoughts for aspiring leaders as they transition?
Well, maybe just to mention, have fun on your path because, people feel that. And when you're enjoying yourself, things are happening easier. I think it's important thing to have fun as well, because we talked about a lot of serious and important things, but I think that enjoying yourself on your life path is super important.
Yeah, like you said, enjoy that cup of coffee and just think about that rather than super complicated stuff.
People are drawn to positive things, and then you have more experiences and all that together.
Thank you very much. Thank you. This was really inspiring.
I hope it was not too much, because I know that sometimes we talk a lot about different things, and I think we went into philosophical direction. And I really wish everyone who's listening to this to have a great time today and to see themselves with a different eye.
Thank you very much for listening to this episode of Atlanta Diaries in its entirety. I really hope you found the conversation insightful or inspiring. I really wish for Atlanta Diaries to be a place where we can learn and unlearn our definitions of success, build a community for the ones who may have multiple North Stars, and connect deeply beyond the limit of this audio file. I do have a request for you. Please share with others who you feel will benefit from this conversation. Because of these conversations, or even a small segment of them, can help champion the journey of even one woman, it'll be worth all the effort. I would love to get suggestions of breakthrough women from you to help strengthen my repertoire. I look forward to seeing you next week for another insightful conversation at Atlanta Diaries.